So welcome to the Detour podcast. Today we've got a really, really interesting guest. Well, all my guests have been interesting, but this one's pretty special, really. He was going to be the next big thing in Australian cycling. He went from riding the Vuelta and the Giro at only 20 years of age for one of the biggest teams in the world to being forced out of the sport with serious heart problems that nearly killed him. So it's Will Walker, for those who didn't guess that. G'day, Will.
Hey, John. How you going? It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on board. And the funny thing is my phone's vibrating next to me, and it's a WhatsApp call from Simon Gerrans. So you'll just have to wait. He's not as important as you, Will. So we'll talk to him later. But you would have raced against him a few times in the years gone by. But now, I bumped into you a couple of months ago, but more so just last week. My son's in hospital with a asthmatic type thing, not COVID, thank goodness, but he's got some serious issues. And he rings me on Friday and says, "Oh, you wouldn't guess who my doctor is here, Dad?" I said, "Who's that, mate?" He said, "Will Walker." I said, "I'll be blown. I knew you were doing a medical. So you knew your last year of residency at Geelong."
Yeah, well, I'm getting to the tail end of the medical training. So, it's a small world, isn't it?
So I don't have to call you Dr. Will yet.
No, not yet.
Okay. So
you don't ever have to call me that, John.
You'll charge me anyway, so it doesn't matter. But we'll tell that story later. But now is the time where I introduce my great sponsors, because without sponsors, we don't have a podcast. Firstly, Bike Exchange, who have been a sensational partner in cycling and very involved with a lot of Jerry's team. They sponsor the Mitchell and Scott team. And Bike Exchange, where the world buys, sells, learns and rides. Bike Exchange, where a bike is not just a bike. And at the moment, bike sales are going through the roof, as you well know, Will. And it's hard to actually buy a bike in a bike shop, especially in the lower range of anything under $2,000. There's not much stock around. So the best place is to jump on Bike Exchange, and there's loads of bikes there for sale. Our other great partner is Let's Go Motorhomes. Now, Let's Go Motorhomes, all Jaycos, of course, get out and explore your backyard. Hire a Let's Go motorhome or camper van for your next great escape and take the bikes along with you. Now, we've got a special on, which is perfect for you, Will, I reckon. It's their early bird special. So you book 90 days in advance and you get 5% off your next Aussie adventure. So you just jump onto the website, letsgomotorhomes.com, packages, early bird specials. So I reckon I could see once this lifts the restrictions lift, Will, I could see you getting a Let's Go Motorhome and heading down the Great Ocean Road.
Oh, look, as good as the Great Ocean Road is, I think I'd go to the desert. That'd be probably more up my alley.
Okay. What's the attraction? What's the attraction in the desert, mate?
I don't know, just a part of Australia I haven't seen yet. The stars at night time, just finding myself. I don't know. I live down in Geelong anyway at the moment, so the Great Ocean Road's quite close, I suppose.
Well, I'm sure they have an off-road version of their motorhomes, so you might need one of those if you're going into the desert. But our other partner is Lexus of Blackburn. Great sponsors of cycling. They sponsor the women's Herald Sun Tour, the Lexus of Blackburn Bay Crits, which you know quite well, and the Moore family, Andrew and Sarah, and the kids, just wonderful people. So now that you're going to be a doctor on a doctor's salary, Will, I reckon you'd be right in the market for a new Lexus. So I'll send you down. Andrew will look after you without the issue. Sound like a deal?
Yeah, sounds like a really good deal. I'll get the electric one.
So before we get on to all the challenges you had, medical challenges, which put you out of cycling for all that time, let's start at the beginning. We'll go back to the beginning. The first time I can remember you racing was as a 17-year-old when you won a stage of the Bay Crits in around the Botanic Gardens in Geelong. And you're away in a breakaway with a Pom. I can remember a few of you away. You and one of the Poms who was one of the Olympic pursuit team. You two got clear, and he sort of attacked you coming at the bell. You counter-attacked him and took it out. What are your memories of that?
Yeah, look, that was one of the probably highlights of my career, John. So I remember I wasn't particularly good when I was, coming up through the under-17 ranks, and I just figured out how to train properly up at Bright, living with my grandparents. And I was lucky enough to get in a team called CBD Cycles for the Bay Crits, and I had a few people come up to me and say, "Oh, you're too young to be doing this," and giving me a hard time. And I was just in awe of all of the people I was racing against from the first stage, and happy to keep up. And I can't remember what happened on the third stage. It was that beautiful circuit down at the Geelong, the hot dog, and a few people crashed, and all of a sudden I just ended up in 8th position, and it gave me a lot of confidence. And then coming into the fourth stage, I actually ended up attacking that day just because I couldn't see. I didn't own a pair of sunglasses yet. And I know it sounds almost unbelievable, but it was one of those sunset twilight days. So I couldn't see coming down not the home straight, but the waterfront straight of that Botanical Gardens course. So I ended up in a breakaway with Cookie and Brent Dawson, and I ended up dispatching of them relatively quickly, which was just by accident. And I was solo for most of it. And I didn't know what to do out there. I was, just a new kid on the block. And I must have been going pretty strong. But, just the crowd that night, it felt like I was in riding in the MCG or something.
It was a huge crowd. But I remember my favourite memory of that is when you took out the stage and you're up on the presentation dais, and Phil Liggett grabbed hold of you, and because Robbie McEwen won the bunch kick in, and for second or third or whatever it was, and he said, "How's it feel? Well done," he said, "and how's it feel to beat Robbie McEwen?" And what did you say?
I think I said something like, "I'm just happy to meet him."
Exactly. I'm just happy to meet him. Oh, what a great line. So, as a youngster, you really did kick it off. You obviously had amazing natural ability. I read here where you had a VO2 max reading of 94, which puts you into the sort of super elite class. So you obviously had the natural talent, but you had a fierce will to win, and that comes through. I was talking to Dave Sanders just the other day, and he said that was the thing that really stood out so much with him. And he remembered it was just the next year where you had a solid year. You won the Melbourne Warrnambool. I think you were only 18, and you ended up winning the whole Tats Cup series for the best rider in Victoria. It's in the seniors, not the under 23s, and you're only 18 years of age. And he said to me, he told you in the Warrnambool, he said, "Look, 300 and something kilometres is a bit far for you. So when you get down towards Camperdown, you should think about hopping in the vehicle or just down past this. Is I'll be in a certain spot, so that's a time for you to get in." He said, "As you come past me, you attack down the road." So he was very impressed, and you won the Warrnambool 18. That must have been an amazing day.
Yeah, it definitely was. It's God, it feels like a long time ago now. Must be 2004, so 16 years ago. It was a really amazing day. It's just a long time on the saddle. I don't think I've ever been on the saddle since then for 8 hours. It was one of those things that you planned in your head for a race to pan out that way, and it kind of ended up panning out exactly how I thought it probably would have panned out. I was training a lot with a Victorian cyclist at the time called Johnny Clark, who's I think still racing. And, I just thought we trained together, we might as well attack together. And we ended up attacking and coming first and second.
And he was only 18 as well. So it was pretty amazing, really. And then I remember the next year, I think it was it later that year when you went to the Worlds was it the next year when you come second in the Junior Worlds?
Yeah, it was the year after I came second in the
Yeah.
under-23 Worlds.
Yeah. So you're only 19.
Yeah.
So tell us about that. That was in Madrid. So tell us about that day.
Oh, look, that was a good day. I knew I was going pretty well because I came, I think, 7th or 6th or 5th in the Touted l'Avenir just before it. It was a nice moment too because my dad made the trip out from Australia, and his long-term friend and my godfather, who's Spanish, they drove up on their motorbikes together to watch. So I had support, and I don't know, I was really a lazy under-23 cyclist, to be honest, though. Like I just cruised at the back of the peloton. I was so uninterested for a lot of the race, and that was probably the reason why I was, put in a really good performance, because I only got to the front with 2 laps to go. And, there was one crazily good cyclist on that day. It was Dmitry Grabowski. So he was never in touch to beat. He was solo for 80 kilometers or something crazy.
Oh, really?
And, I just attacked on the last climb, and one of the Russian guys bridged across to me, and who later became one of my teammates. And, I just kind of, it was one of those things I used to do a lot. I used to be really good at playing poker in the finish and making sure everybody else led me out for the sprint. So I ended up beating a guy that was a sprinter, and I got second. So it was pretty amazing, and it was just good. My first time in the under-23 Worlds. I think there haven't been too many Aussies on the under-23 podium. There have been more lately, but in those days it was pretty rare. So it was really a good day.
So is that what got Rabobank interested, I guess? Was it that performance? That
Yeah,
and the Touted l'Avenir?
Yeah, I was already on the Rabobank under-23 team that year. It was one of those things. The AIS has been a great program forever. But I just felt like I wanted to step up a bit early. It was probably a mistake to, sign with Rabobank early. But yeah, so straight out of first year under-23s, I signed with them and did the Touted l'Avenir with them that year. And I think from that point on, they were, eyeing me off as, turning pro with the World Tour team.
So you did turn pro, and you turned pro very young at 20 years of age. But I remember early in the next year, the Australian Road Championship in just out of Adelaide, and they back then used to whack the under-23s in with the seniors. So you put a fix to that. They had to change those rules after that year, because you won the overall title. Tell us through that day, because it's an amazing day.
Yeah, it really was, actually. I don't know, I was getting really cocky in those years. I mean, that's probably wasn't a good quality. It was good for winning races, but I just had this self-belief that I was going to win and nothing was going to stop me. And so we made a break early on. I think about 20 guys made the selection. It was one of those breaks that a lot of the good guys were there, the guys that were strong. And there were some relatively unknown guys. Like there was one guy that looked perfectly awful on the bike. I mean, that was Adam Hansen. So he turned out to be pretty good. And so, there were Matt Wilson's there, and, some really good cyclists. So I think I knew that I was stronger than everybody on that day, and I just had to play my cards right to win. And they let Adam Hansen get quite a decent gap because nobody knew who he was. And I ended up chasing him by myself. I just had to attack from the front of the peloton because everybody was looking at me. So I thought I'll do it in a way that when I do break them, they'll lose motivation. And so I came across to Adam Hansen. He wasn't slowing down for me on this downhill. I thought, you got to just wait up for me so we can work together and get first and second here. And he kept going. And by the time the downhill ended, it went uphill. And I thought, bugger you for not looking behind your shoulder. So I just went straight past him. And I think the rest is history. And I think I remember just over the top of the hill, there was Dave Sanders on the side of the road, and he was trying to give me a bottle. And I thought, Dave, I don't need a bottle, mate. There's 10K to go, and I'm going to win this thing by a minute. And it was good. So, yeah. And then we had interaction after the finish line,
Oh, look,
didn't we?
I still laugh about that because you were just after cross the line. You came back to clean yourself up before the presentation. You're sitting on the tailgate of a vehicle there, and I walked over and said, "Bloody hell, Will, congratulations, mate!" And you said, "This will get me start money in the next Bay Crits."
Yeah. Oh, look, the Bay Crits has always been my favourite race. So, but there probably is a bit of clarification that I think, when I was racing, there's not a question in my mind that everybody knew that I could have been the Aussie champion, and they were chasing me as if I was going to be the winner. I mean, they were marking me from 3 laps out. So, and then, obviously there was that decision at the end that I ended up with 2 gold medals and 2 Australian Championship jerseys as the winner of both the under-23 and the seniors. And there was this decision that because Russell Van Hat was the first over the line, that he could wear the winner's jersey, even though I had both jerseys and both gold medals, which I still have somewhere under a bed. And so there ended up being a little bit of discussion around that. Rabobank wasn't very happy with that. So a few phone calls later, and the decision was reversed that I was allowed to wear the national championship jersey through all of the races in Europe, which I wore in the Vuelta a España, and that I was deemed the winner of the 2006 Australian Senior Championship. And I probably should have done something earlier, John, because I don't go and watch the Nationals very often, but it's a little bit annoying to not have my name on the title after winning the race.
I think you're dead right. We should do something about that. Leave that in my hands, mate. I'll take that on as a task.
I like Russell, but I mean, at least an asterisk or something, at least I wouldn't mind it. That'd be great. That'd be my parting request.
I like Russell. Russell's a good guy. And I remember when Russell rode the Giro, he and Trent Wilson rode with Gianni Savio's team, and who was the team that I rode for. And I remember I was on that Giro and I was sort of helping them, and they were really struggling in the last half of the tour. They were always in the back group and just getting through and almost getting eliminated. And I'm just trying to give them a little bit of advice and how to look after themselves and everything. They got to the time trial with about 4 days to go, three days to go maybe, a sort of long individual time trial. And I said, just take it easy. Use this as a rest day. Just don't get eliminated and recover. And I saw Russell getting an aero helmet and adjusting everything. I said, what are you doing? He said, no, I'm a good time trialer. I said, listen, Russ, if you can't finish top 10, it's not worth doing it, mate. And he said, I plan to finish top 10. I said, oh, okay. I was kept out of it. Anyway, he finished 6th or 7th. And as he crossed the line, he gave me the finger.
Yeah, wow.
Great ride.
Yeah,
anyway.
I think those two are two of the, two really good Aussie cyclists, weren't they?
Yeah, characters. So let's go back. So you've won the Australian Senior Road title, 19, just about to turn 20. And you're about to race with Rabobank in the big time. So take us through that.
Yeah, I've just got to try and remember, John. I decided. I think the team asked me to turn pro halfway through that year, and I think the reason might have been that Denis Menchov was doing particularly well, and they wanted him. I can't remember the reason, but halfway through the year, I turned pro. And my 3rd race as a pro, I got the late call up because of Denis Menchov being in good form to help him in the Tour of Spain, which I was probably fortunate that he turned out not to be riding that well and didn't want to be on GC for the Tour of Spain. So I got off the hook having to pull turns on the front. But bloody hell, that was the hardest thing that I have ever had to do in my life. I mean, there were different times, of course, in cycling back then, and there were some, standout performances that you had to deal with, and they tend to make it really hard to just finish in the time limit. But I remember day 18, I could hardly walk up one flight of stairs. I was so exhausted, and we 20k at 60 an hour to the bottom of this first hill on a 200-kilometre stage. And I reckon as soon as I saw the hill, I was dropped by myself. I was so exhausted. I just thought, this is rough. And I'm going up the hill and I'm full gas, like sweating, salt all over my face, looking like I'm about to die. And we had this director sportif, and he was that guy, Joop Zoetemelk, and he finished on the Tour de France podium a few times, world champion, and he wound down his window and he told me in Dutch, he said, just put it in the big chainring and go faster. And I thought, oh, mate, I might be a talented cyclist, but I'm so cooked right now that all I'm thinking is just, I just threw my drink bottles out. I was like, that's the only thing I can do to go faster is drop half a kilo. Anyway, I made it to the top, and I obviously made it through the time, time cut and and made it through to the end of the Vuelta. But yeah, it was really tough.
I raced against Joop Zoetemelk. He was an amazing man. He actually won the Tour de France, actually, so he was pretty good. Yeah. But so then you finished the Vuelta, but you're actually cooked. What did you do from there? Did you get time to recover, or were you straight into other races?
I still did races after it, which it was in that period of time. It was only 14 years ago, but I was probably one of the Aussies that wasn't well managed. I think I was doing a tour the week after and then some one-day races. So apart from being probably way too young to start a Grand Tour, I still ended up racing after it. And I can't remember when exactly. It was either after that or maybe one of the first races of the next year. I had this first feeling of being really exhausted, but of an arrhythmia, something going wrong with my heart. And it was too difficult to explain to any of the doctors what I meant. And I know it was like no doctor had ever heard of a cardiac arrhythmia, which is much more common talk in pro cycling right now. But I described the symptoms and they just didn't really say too much about it. And I think doing the Vuelta at such a young age and was probably something that led to that downfall. And then I ended up.
Do you think that actually was the start of it? Do you think it was caused by you riding it at such a young age?
Yeah, I don't know about. Maybe it would have happened anyway, and it could be that my heart is predisposed to arrhythmias when it becomes bigger and the more stress that it's under. So maybe if I waited to 23 or 24, it would have happened anyway. I guess you don't really know about how these things pan out. I probably can be honest with myself that I was my own worst enemy with training. I did love to do a good training session, and I guess I grew up thinking that the more stress you could put your body under and recover, the better you ended up going. And that works for a certain period of time, but after a while, your body says no, and mine said no comprehensively.
So the next year you ride the Giro. How did you feel in that one?
Well, that one I was going really well. So we had Rasmussen in our team, and he's got a colourful career. I'm not sure if the people into cycling now know about Michael Rasmussen, but it was interesting. In the team time trial, he had to tell me to slow down up the hill. So I was going pretty well, and in that first couple of stages in Sicily or Sardinia, I can't remember, in Sardinia, I was going really well on the climbs, and I think I got a top 10 down there, and I got into one of the breakaways on stage 7 or stage 8, and I was the only guy that could follow Bettini on one of these shorter climbs. And he ended up getting second on the stage. It went flat at the end, which meant I lost my advantage of being good on those short, punchy climbs. But I was, doing pretty well on the GC, and the team said I was, happy for me to keep riding towards GC. But look, John, they were still in those days where people got better after recovery days, and I tended to get a lot worse as the tour went on, and I just got fatigued. And by the time we hit some climbs later on in the second and third week, and it got rainy and my legs just got heavier and heavier, I ended up fading anyway. So, but there were good signs in that Giro that I probably could have been a good GC rider in the future. And the team was really happy with how I was going.
So, is it round about this time where you got a relationship with Dr. Sassi? Now, Aldo Sassi was the legendary cycling coach who looked after Cadel and also Mick Rogers, and he only used to look after a very select group of riders. So, tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough. I think the first time I met him was when I was at the MAPA testing centre, and my VO2 was obviously pretty big, so he came down and had a look. He was a really intimidating guy, man of few words, but they were always powerful words. And then I was lucky enough through the Australian team, through Shane Bannon, to be introduced to him. And I was probably, going down this road of more training's better, and I needed a better, more specific training program so I could map out training improvements over the next 10 years and manage my training load better. So it was the year before the Giro that I started working with him. I remember him telling me that I shouldn't do the Tour of Spain, and I think he was right. And then the start of that year that I did the Giro, I remember it was in February or so, and it was snowing outside and it was miserable. And I was living in Belgium at the time, and I got a call from the directors of the team, and they said, we're chatting, and I said, this is shocking. Coming from Australia to live in Belgium in February is not much fun. And they said to me, you can live wherever you want now that you're professional. So, I reckon it took me about a minute to make a decision and call and I called Shane Bannon and I said, Shane, I'm on my way to Italy. Where can I stay? And Shane ended up organising for me to stay in Castrano with this sculptor called Pietro Scampini. And Pietro's also used to look after Cadel, and he's looked after Simon Clark as well. So I pretty much arrived on his doorstep, not speaking a word of Italian. And that was where I fell in love again with Italy. And, it was probably only a week or two after that, being taken into his family as an extra son. Then Aldo wanted to invite me for dinner to meet his daughter. It was a quasi setup, I have to admit. I think she wanted to improve her English, and so yeah, we started pretty soon there, and I ended up spending the last part of my pro career living in the house with Aldo and the family, and really being taken in by them. So
I think you actually got engaged to the daughter at one stage, didn't you, mate?
Yeah, look, we did have a quite a long engagement. Actually, it was one of those things. It was a really, beautiful time to remember, and somebody the family, and including her, just always be dear to my heart. Because we obviously had to deal together with the tragic death of Aldo. He was diagnosed with brain cancer in, I think, around 2010, and that was obviously extremely tragic. But yeah, I think that's probably getting to know him and getting to live with him and have him as a role model in my final years of pro cycling and just after is probably one of my best memories of of the whole journey of pro cycling, especially being in Italy. It's hard to explain. He's just one of those characters that leaves such a legacy on the people that he touches. And he first was with the MAPA team, and then he was the coach of Cadel and Ivan Basso, and he really believed in giving riders a second chance. He really believed in a strong anti-doping stance in sport and in cycling. He believed in rigorous science behind training, and he was way ahead of his time with that. And then he was just such an honest person. Like you don't meet many people like him. And I remember I was a pretty, I'd say, cocky, young, uneducated kid at that stage. And he said to, I don't know, I think somebody was around, or it might have been my mum, to come and visit. And he said this big line in English that, the three things Will needs to become good. It's religion. It was religion, educación, and I can't remember the third one, but it might have been discipline. And I think I lacked all three of those things. And I've been spending a good part of 15 years to try and make up for two of them. I haven't become religious just yet. But yeah, it was just really, really good times, and I'm still super close with the family, and make every attempt to get over there and see them each year. And I'm very grateful for that. So
yeah, he was a very special guy, and strangely enough, when I was over there one time, it was Shane who took me to meet the sculptor guy you were just talking about, who you first stayed with, and he is an amazing guy. And he took me through his little factory there, or his little warehouse where he makes all of the sculptures. Just some wonderful, wonderful stuff there. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. So I lived downstairs to that. So I was through Pietro and through these Italians, I was exposed to, these cultural aspects of, Italy, and art and good cooking, so many things that, I would have never seen if I wasn't a cyclist over in Italy. So I'm very lucky, and looking forward to seeing those Pietro as well when I get back over there once this coronavirus ends.
Yeah, hopefully we'll all be back next year. So we're gonna take a break now, and when we return, we'll talk about the issues that nearly killed you, Will.
Eyes on Bikes help grow small businesses. We are the world's #1 bike marketplace, where buyers and sellers are brought together in a place where a bike is never just a bike. Bike Exchange, where the world buys, sells, learns, and rides.
So, Will, you went from being a young pro with the world at your feet to a rider with serious health issues. So, how did that happen? How gradual was that change?
Yeah, look, it's difficult to say. I think that year of the Giro, I managed to limp through. I started to get these indications that my heart was misbehaving, but it was hard to really diagnose because it only happens sometimes, and to capture any arrhythmia that's exercise induced means that you need to have the 12-lead ECG on at the time. So it went undiagnosed for a while, and it was actually the next year I think my body was just saying no. I was training up for the Tour of California. I was going really, really well. As I think I could have been a podium chance. My numbers were through the roof, and then I ended up getting Bell's palsy, which is facial paralysis. So that's where you have no muscles on this side of the face, and it starts to droop. So I had that, and around the same time, they uncovered the arrhythmia. So I had this thing called the catheter ablation, which essentially burns a part of your heart tissue to get rid of that circuit that causes the fast heart rate. So I had those two things at the same time, and as I was making my comeback, the team really wasn't into me being in Australia. It was kind of as if they didn't believe me what was happening. I got hit by a camper van from behind up training in Bright. So then I had chronic back pain for that year, and then I was back in Italy, and then I was training there, and I had a head-on collision with a car. And so what does a good team do for a guy that's been through so much? They send him to 3 tours in a row with about 2 rest days in between each one. So I went from, I can't remember if I remember this correctly, I think I went from Tour of Catalonia, which was a world tour race, and somehow I got 6th or 7th on one of the medium hilly stages, but I was still very far from good form. Then 2 days after, they sent me to Tour of Belgium, and then a few days after, they sent me to the Dauphiné Libéré. So I went with probably a few thousand kilometres in my legs, and a bad back, a heart that needed some rest, the Bell's palsy, which was only just starting to recover, and to having I fell in such a heap at the third race, the Dauphiné, that it was this Epstein-Barr virus, chronic fatigue type symptoms that felt like I really couldn't ride out of, whatever the sayings you've got, ride out of sight on a dark night. And I think, that ended up intermittently deteriorating over the next 6 months, that when I got to riding for a new team, a Spanish team, which would have been so much better for me and for my career with that relaxed way that they go about things, I was in the Tour Down Under, and these symptoms of me just not having any energy kept coming back, that, I ended up, the retirement went down as a cardiac issue. But that wasn't actually the thing that was causing me not to be a good pro cyclist in that last year. It was really that I was just so well and truly cooked that I just couldn't constantly perform at the level of a pro cyclist. And that was enough for me just to say, look, there's more things in life that I'd like to try and have a go at. It's not working for me. And it was probably Aldo at that time that was looking after me. I was engaged with his daughter. He said, you do something else. There's plenty of things, time to retire. And he was a really good head on a good set of shoulders that thought about doing the sensible thing. So I retired, and I was pretty good with it initially.
How old were you then? Were you 23?
Oh, not even. I reckon I might have been just 22, I think.
Yeah. Gee, that's staggering. But you must get a little bit angry at Rabobank. Here they are, one of the biggest teams in the world. I think they might have been number 1 or number 2 team in the world. And they didn't have the structure to really look after the youngsters. They were just race, go well or get out type of attitude.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say that they're different now. There probably is still quite a few staff in common, but I think it looks from the outside like they're a good team. And to be frank, that was probably just the time. And, as if the Stuart O'Grady's and all of these heroes of Australian cycling, they would have done it just like I did it, or worse. But Stewie's got a body that you could put him in 9 Grand Tours in a row and he'd probably come out stronger than he started. My body was super strong until it wasn't. And so, it was just a product of the time. If I had have been 15 years younger, then maybe pro cycling would have been better for me, and maybe it wouldn't. Maybe my underlying heart condition was going to be there all along. So there's lots of questions and there's no real answers. And, if I saw all of the team and the directors, I don't think I'd harvest any bitterness towards them. It's one of those things that happens, and things could have been different. And I can also point the stick at myself and say that I was probably too eager and I loved training too much, and I'd always say yes to doing any race. So I could have also just said no. But
yeah. So you're 22, 23. You've decided to retire. So what happened next?
Yeah. So over the next 3 years, I just tried to find myself. To be honest, John. Sorry, moving this. I wanted to achieve something great. I think since then when I was a kid, I wanted to be a Tour de France champion. I thought, I want to leave my mark on this world. And that's anybody looked up to Lance Armstrong, and I just wanted to be like that. So once that was taken away from me, I really just thought I need to make a successful business or do something for myself. And, so I chased these goals of, creating something in business or having a good job. But, I did some property developments with my brother. I really just tried a lot of different things to see, A, what I was good at, and B, where I could end up redefining myself. And there were probably 3 years there where I did have some success and I did do reasonably okay, but I just felt like I kept falling short and wasn't really good at anything, and that I really couldn't find my place in the world. I was somebody that wanted to be a winner, that, I didn't have the mindset of being a domestique. I always just pictured myself as being the guy that was, on GC and, for Tour de France success. And I think you have to be realistic at a certain point. If you have that character, that you understand what the limitations are for that. And I had various jobs, and I just ended up realizing that they weren't the right thing for me at the right time, and they weren't the things that were going to give me satisfaction and growth opportunities for a long, long time. And I think I was just still probably not admitting it, but I was really fighting a loss of identity from cycling. And I always got on with the job, but I think at the end of 3 years of being retired and hardly looking at the bike, when I was finally offered a chance to come back, I wasn't sensible, thinking, should I be doing this? Is my heart okay? I just thought this is probably the only way for me to truly redefine myself. Well, actually, it's not redefine myself. It's actually go back to being something I was good at and always good at.
Yeah.
So
you came back. Is that when you come back with Drapac, or is it when you come back with that as you Becca's down team?
Yeah, so there was only one comeback, and it went from riding with Drapac, and then I thought I'd get back to Europe and race with the team from Azerbaijan. Yeah, and that was really it. It was a 2-year comeback. There were probably always going to be question marks over whether I should have done it. If I could go back in time, I probably wouldn't change things anyway. I used the comeback as a really good opportunity to go back to university, and that's where I started doing a finance degree. I used that stability of being good at something again and really understanding where I was to probably just take a longer term view on finding something that would sustain me for a long time. I probably knew in that comeback, there were times where I thought I could have been really good again and as a pro, but for some reason, as a 26-year-old, after a 3-year or 3 and a bit year retirement, I felt old. And now that I'm 34, it's the silliest thought of all time, because I was still super young, but I really felt like I was old then, and that it wasn't possible to make a comeback after 3 years off. So that was interesting, but that was probably not a bad thing, considering that it didn't turn out to be the right decision, or didn't turn out to be a long-term career, and that I was always thinking about redefining myself in other ways in that point in time anyway.
So before we get on to that day in Buninyong when it all came to a head, how had it been in that 12 months? Had you had any serious challenges with your heart, or had it been not too bad?
It was actually pretty good. I'd got on top of a lot of those. I really had just 1 or 2 outbreaks of arrhythmias, or that, really fast heart rate. But they were pretty minor and well controlled, and I didn't train as much. I looked after my body. I made sure I didn't have too much caffeine. I was really good with my diet. It was pretty good until that day, I have to be honest. And that day was a shocker. So
well, let's take us through that day. So here we are. You're at Buninyong. You're up the road. You're in the break, and you're feeling pretty good.
Yeah, look, I was good on that day. I just the hills weren't hurting me. I think I really could have gone out on a high note. I think I had the ability that day to win. But I just started getting these, flutters, which I knew that it was ventricular tachycardia. They up to that point in my career, they'd always been non-sustained tachycardias, which means that my heart rate went up to 250, 300 beats a minute, but it only lasted for 8 or 10 seconds. And I'd had a few going up the hill, and I just decided to drop off and try and come back on the descent a couple of times, because I was really juggling between, oh, my legs think I can win today, and I really probably should just call it a day. And I ended up deciding to call it a day, and I had this weird thought that I really love cycling so much. I could have been a pro cyclist till I was 100, and happily just spent 6 hours a day on the bike. And so I thought, I'll just I can't pull out before the peloton catches me, because that looks a bit weird. So I'll let the peloton catch me. I'll give a bottle to one of my teammates up the hill. And even just as I gave a bottle to one of my teammates, hardly even trying, my heart just went out of control. And so I knew that one of the things I had to do is try and get my core body temperature down. I was convinced that it would have just stopped. So I found a place on the side of the road. Still a little bit hard for me to talk about this, to be honest, but I ended up just in a sustained ventricular tachycardia that turned into probably ventricular flutter, quasi cardiac arrest on the side of the road, where I was, managed by the ambulance. I was cardio inverted and taken to hospital. So it was a shit way to end a career. And it's probably a day that I don't need to relive all that often.
No, but everyone was really shocked. Do you remember who actually, the ambulance guy who actually grabbed you? Do you remember?
I don't, but if you do remember, John, I even came back the next year and I met them again, and I think I just had too much post-traumatic stress to chat with them about it. So I kind of fobbed them off as if they weren't there to help me. So if you do know how to track down the people that were there on the day, please tell them I'm extremely grateful. And I think I'm at a good place right now where I'd be able to talk to them about it and just thank them for, going through the process of saving my life.
So I did a bit of Googling before, and I found a couple of different yarns. One of them by Ron Reed, who I was talking to. Ronnie and I are close mates, of course, and I told him I was going to be talking to you. He said to say hello. But a couple of the yarns, and one of them was saying, talked about some of the issues you had after that, where you had some serious episodes just walking.
Yeah, so tell Ron I say hi. He's an absolutely lovely guy. And so I think, that's exactly right. So the doctors discharged me pretty soon from Ballarat Hospital, as if it was a exercise-induced arrhythmia and that, I was lucky to be alive, but it probably wouldn't happen without, pro sport. So I started feeling unwell a few weeks after that, because I'd been given quite a lot of this drug called antiarrhythmic medication. It really reduced these strange beats in the short term. But I started feeling persistently unwell. And I was so fortunate to have had in my life a really extremely well-known exercise cardiologist called Andre Legersh, who, took interest in my case. And so I was lucky to be able to call him on speed dial, more or less. And he arranged on a panel of, cardiologists, a way to manage my condition. And they weren't unanimously thinking the same thing. It was him that thought I could benefit from having a pacemaker defibrillator implanted in case something bad were to happen again. So I was lucky enough to have had that done in March that year. And I was so fortunate that I was woken up a few days after in the middle of the night being defibrillated from what may have been a deathly arrhythmia again. And I've been, in the year following that, out walking, doing anything. Having this conversation right now probably would have got me discharged. I would have gone into just from the anxiety and from the PTSD, I would have gone into a regular rhythm and ended up being discharged. So I had profound post-traumatic stress from the events. I didn't drive a car for a few months. I really, I couldn't walk upstairs. I was really in a bad way. So, you know, I had to find something good, John. I really did. I had beautiful people in my life. I was lucky to be alive, but I didn't think I was going to live, if I'm really honest. So I started having this bold vision of in hospital. I thought I'll use my time wisely. I'll become a doctor. So I set up a room in the hospital at the Royal Melbourne to start studying for this entrance, 6-hour entrance test to get into medicine, which is called the GAMSAT, with all of the smart kids. And that was where I initially had, these dreams of doing something good. But the first thought was probably just trying to find any good thought at the end of a really dark tunnel of thinking my time was probably going to be up.
So what's the situation now? So that's going back a few years now. So what's the situation now?
Yeah, so that was in 2014, and so I started deciding to try and get into medicine there. I took a job working at the Research Institute, Baker Institute, which does research into cardiac disease and diabetes. And that was where I caught up with Ron Reed a couple of times as well, and really got into not doing the research myself, but raising money for a good cause. And in that time, I was, trying to learn chemistry, physics, biology, to sit that GAMSAT test. And initially, I did quite well on the test straight up. And so I got a good enough score that would allow me to get into medical school, but I still had to get through the interview process. So I was interviewed a couple of years in a row at Melbourne University, but the PTSD that I suffered was just too much for me to really have a good chance at getting in. I just felt like I was going to die every time I got asked a question. So it took me the third time to when I was interviewing at Deakin Medicine to have overcome enough of the trauma to be able to get through an interview session. And then I got into medicine. So
your heart, but right now, you still got the defibrillator implant? Is it still part of your life?
Yeah, it is, and I don't think I've really mentioned it more than once or twice this year. I'm now in the hospital. I'm seeing patients with them, and I'm seeing patients managed. And, they'll say to me, "Oh, but a young fellow like you wouldn't know what it's like to have a chronic condition," or something like that. And I think, I could not be luckier or healthier. I had a gradual progression over the last 6 years to slowly improve. I can ride my bike again, albeit slowly. I can do anything that I want. I'm managed with some medications, and I haven't been discharged. I haven't been defibrillated for 3 years, at least 4 years. So I'm actually one of the luckiest people going around, and I'm very grateful. And I still, I'm also still, as much as it would be great to go back and say, let's change this or that, I'm now healthy again. I'm doing something that really interests me, like pro cycling. I can not just have something that interests me for the rest of my life. It's something where when I'm in the hospital and, you're with patients and you're able to help them through their own journey, that I really feel like I'm part of something and able to give back as well. So as much as it'd be good to change stuff, I'm just, I'm one of the happiest people going through COVID right now. I've just got a big smile on my face. The world's not a great place at the moment, but I just think there's so many good stories out there, and I'm lucky to be still standing. And I rode into the hospital this morning, and I'll do my 20k ride home, not very fast, but just every time I'm out on the bike, I'm smiling.
Well, I'll definitely, as soon as we're allowed, I'll definitely catch you for a pedal, mate, because I won't put you under any pressure. I can promise you that.
Oh, you probably will, though.
But so in between doing your medical degree and when you stopped, you worked with Green Edge for a little while in their training camp in Australia and in Varazzi. What was that like?
Yeah, look, that was really good. I was before they started, I spent the 6 months with the team building it up, helping out the initial management. And I think it was really good. I had good experiences from it, but I think I wasn't the right fit for that team. I was very young still, and I think there were probably, rightly so, people that didn't think I had the skills to work as even an assistant director or looking after the young guys, and I was still somebody that wanted to achieve something big, and I probably just didn't end up being the right fit for the organisation at the time, and when I was given an opportunity to make a comeback, I really thought I need to take this opportunity, but also take this opportunity to rebuild myself, get the skills so that when I do have an opportunity in an organisation, that I understand what my strengths are and find a position that works for that. So, yeah, it was one of those things. I was lucky enough when I was super young to be given an opportunity to work for Green Edge that any young kid would have thought was the best thing ever. And I did think it was fantastic, but I quickly realised that, I needed to do something for myself, and I think I made the right decision as well. And they're still going strong, and they certainly didn't need me in there. And they've won more races than most teams would be ever lucky to be able to say they won.
Yes, it's been an amazing journey, that's for sure. And I'm working on a exercise with Jerry Ryan at the moment to get all the stories of his cycling journey. So that's a page for another story.
Well, I can tell you one of my most memorable. I've got two good Jerry Ryan stories. One is that I hadn't even met him yet, and the year I won the Melbourne to Warrnambool, a check came in the mail with thanks to his generosity. And a second one, which was really good, was when Aldo Sassi came out to Australia to watch his last World Championships. It was only a few months before he passed away, I think. Jerry Ryan invited him and myself and his daughter Chiara and Aldo's wife to dinner at his house. And we came into his house, and it was just the most beautiful dinner with wines that I had never thought I would be able to try in my life. And it was probably one of those good eye openers, but it was just really lovely to see his generosity and warmth, and to somebody that was coming towards a close in his life.
Yes, and he was quite young too, wasn't he, Aldo? He was only like 51, I reckon. I thought he must have been older than that, but gee, because he looked a bit older because he was so unwell, I suppose. But, terrible time. So in this current climate we're in, mate, now that you're almost a doctor, with the whole COVID-19 challenges, I'd like to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, I suppose I started learning about COVID early on because a lot of my friends, and one of Aldo's daughters is actually a cardiologist in Italy, so she was at the forefront of the coronavirus frontline there. And so I started hearing about it early. I think it's ended up having a lower mortality than we probably expected early on. And I think the government's had to do everything that they've done. But I have to admit, I'm starting to think that it's so extreme that I'm really worried about some of the long-term ramifications of the health, the lack of primary care for people, that haven't been able to go to the hospital or see their doctor through all of this, the mental health associated with it, the lack of care for chronic diseases like diabetes and people that aren't exercising. And I think there should be discussion about, making sure we're staying on top of this coronavirus, which will hopefully start to dissipate with, once a vaccine comes on board. But I think there's more need for a chat about the health of Australians in general, and I think that's slowly declining. And I think that's why cycling is such a great sport. And when anybody asks me, can I buy a bike, I help them straight away, and we'll end up searching on Bike Exchange for a bike for them to get them out exercising, because it's so important. It doesn't matter how many drugs in the world can look after your health, exercise and looking after yourself like that is just so vital. So I think I went off on a tangent there, didn't I? The primary question was about coronavirus, and
no, exactly. So you, in your final year of medicine, are you looking to specialise in a certain part, like the heart?
Yeah, I definitely am. I think I'll be doing a cardiology rotation coming up, and I love the heart muscle. It's intriguing. It's what's defined my life, and I dare say there's a very good chance I'll be aiming towards becoming a cardiologist as well. So I've got those good mentors that looked after me, and I can aim to try and become as good as they are, which might never happen, but I think that's definitely where I'll be aiming for the future.
So last thing I'll grab you with before you let you go, Will, is your thoughts on cycling in the current climate, not just because of COVID, but where cycling's at. You when you were talking before, you were talking about the challenges in your time, and you, without talking about EPO, you were mentioning, that's what you were saying. It was so hard because of the extra speed of the peloton, because so many people were using that terrible drug. Now, what are your thoughts of the sport now?
Yeah, I think the sport's in a good place. It doesn't strike me as there being a real problem with drugs. You've got guys like Simon Clark that have been around forever, and they're starting to race extremely well, and they've always been against doping, so that they're good indicators. I think the sport, I've been following football a lot, and I think there's a lot cycling can learn from a sport like footy. For me to watch footy closely, I've got the AFL app. I can watch replays of any game. I can watch highlights. There's lots of commentary, and for the life of me, it's just too hard for me in Australia to follow cycling well and watch the races. And 30-second recap on a 200-kilometre stage really isn't good. So I think there's probably areas they can address there. There's still the sponsorship issues. But in general, there's a massive growth of the sport. It's an amazing sport of getting people healthy and physically active. And there's the best superstars coming through that are just ridiculous, like Remco Evenepoel and Mathieu van der Poel and Wout van Aert and the Colombians, winning the tours. And I think the sport's in a really good place. They could probably make some improvements. When you've got somebody like Jerry Ryan that's been putting in so much money and so much time for so many years, and they don't get that reward, I think there's something that should be addressing issues like that, so his team has got a better chance at sustainability. So I think there's some of the issues. I probably have to admit I'm not close enough to it now to really comment, but just from a selfish issue, I would love somewhere where I could watch the video clips of all the races a little bit more easily.
Yeah, no worries. Well, look, mate, thanks heaps again. As I mentioned, you're a doctor in Geelong. My son's in Geelong Hospital. You just stumbled across him the other day, and you've helped him so much. So thank you very much. Hopefully he's getting out tomorrow. So, but thanks heaps, Will. Yeah,
John, a real pleasure. And, just considering the names that have done this podcast, I'm honoured, and I didn't expect to be asked, and just happy that you've thought that it would be an interesting one. So thank you a lot.
Oh, mate, it's an amazing story. It's a real rocky story. Thanks, bud.
Thank you.